Okay gang, Private Jack here. Welcome to part 4 on my series on how to rig an airplane. Okay, so basically this is getting the model ready for export for Source Filmmaker. If you're still with me during the series, what I've done is I've gone and I've animated the model in Blender just to see how things work. Now, if you look here closely, you'll see that the ailerons are actually following the wrong path. They're not following the bone properly. And the reason for that is when I assigned the vertex group, I got them backwards. Or the bones were named backwards. So quick fix around this is to actually select the erroring part and have a look at the vertex group. Here I can see that the left aileron is actually being driven by the right bone. So to fix that, all I have to do is come in here, change the name, and now it's following the proper path. Same thing with this one over here. It's following the left. Come in here, change the name to the actual bone that's driving it, and away it goes. It's working properly. So that's one way of fixing an error. Now, if the bones had been reversed, all I would have to do is change the name of the bones. Anyway, getting this thing ready for Source Filmmaker. Here's our model. I'm going to stop the animations now, blow up the screen a little bit. Here's our model. Right now, this particular model has 21 objects involved with it. Each of the elements of the aircraft are its own single object. When I put this thing into Source Filmmaker, I don't want to have 21 objects that the end user has to look after. Seeing as how it's such a low poly model, what I'm going to do is I'm going to join all these objects together and make just one object out of the entire model. Where you want, what'll happen is if I compile it in the state that it's in, each individual object will be a body group in the model itself, and that's something that I don't want. Come on, select. There we go. So I'm going to touch on every object that's in the model here, and I'm going to join them all together. Easiest way to do this, just press A for all until the whole model lights up. Come into the tool panel and click join. This is now just one object, and you'll notice that the vertex groups all transferred into that one object. So if I was to pose, the bones still move the appropriate object that they're supposed to. Okay, so that done. Next thing that has to happen, and this is basic modeling skills, is it has to be unwrapped into a UV. So I'm going to come in here. I've already unwrapped it once, and I unwrapped them as their own individual objects. So now that I've joined them all together, I have to redo my UV sheet. And because I've already got the model seamed and whatnot else, all I have to do is, and the UVs were properly laid out, all I have to do now is come in here and re-unwrap the model. And here's my model re-unwrapped. If I don't like what I'm seeing, I can want to add more space to the islands. I can come in here and I can adjust the space between the islands, or I can hover my mouse over the UV panel and press P. Sorry, let's Control Z out of that. Control P, and choose from the various UV layouts that are offered to me, so that the tensile density of the actual objects is good. Now once I have my UVs laid out, I can come into the Baker, create a new image, I'm going to call this plane. Assign my resolution, and for a valve model it has to be to the power 2, so 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, yada yada yada, all the way up. I'm going to leave it at 1024 by 1024. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to go to my baker now, and I'm going to bake the textures for it. Okay, not really liking what I'm seeing here. I might have a little bit of bleeding. I can decrease the size of the margin for my overspray and just rebake. Once I have a good bake and I'm happy with it, all I have to do now is come down here to Image, File Save, Save Image As, and send this away to some place where I can get it into GIMP and convert it into a VTF. Okay, now that my textures are done, my object is now all just one object. I'm going to get it ready for export for Source FilmMaker. First thing I can do is I can get rid of this root bone. It's not required. Like I told you in the previous sessions, the object origin point is going to form the root transform bone. Okay, so I can come in here into edit mode and delete that bone. Because the origin point is sitting on the ground, the root transform bone is going to be automatically generated by Studio MDL to be here on the floor, so that when I load the model up, it's going to come in and it's going to sit above the floor in Source FilmMaker. Now that that's gone, all I have to do now is set up Blender Source Tools. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this Actual DMX, because this is where I'm going to put my DMX files. Accept. I'm going to change my engine path to where Studio MDL is for Source FilmMaker. So that's in my Steam Apps Common Source FilmMaker bin folder. And if I come down here, I can find Studio MDL right there. I'm going to accept that. Then I'm going to scroll down here to the Source Engine QC path. I'm going to select the mod folder that I want it to go into, and I put my mods that I create into a folder within user mod. So all I have to do is select user mod, and what the Blender Source Tool has to find is the game info text file, and that is right here. So I accept that, and then I tell it where I'm going to put my QC, and I always put my QCs in with my DMXs so that I don't have to spell out paths. I'm going to accept that. Now, because I'm exporting DMXs, I could actually sit down and I could tell it a material path. Problem with material path is that if your aircraft or if your model uses more than one folder, it will only look for materials in that one folder. Now, next thing that I have to do is I have to actually set up my materials. So I'm going to select the aircraft. I'm going to come over here, and because I've gone and made a texture, I can now get rid of all these materials. But before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a material. I'm going to select new, and I'm going to name my material plane. I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to select all the vertices because I need to be able to see that they're all laid out properly on the UV pad, and I'm going to click assign. now that that's done, and I want to see my texture in on the aircraft again, what I'll have to do is set up the actual texture. So open, and there it is there. Open that, and point to plane, and click assign. Okay, why didn't you light up the way you're supposed to? Tab. Maybe because I don't have textured solids turned on. There we go. Okay, so now that we know that the textures work, we can export the model. No, we can't. Before we do that, what we have to do is we have to get rid of all these other materials that are on this model, or the model will expect to find a VMT for each listed material that the model is exported with. So now I can come through and I can delete all these materials because I've assigned it to the airplane, or to the plane texture, and now I can export it. So back into Blender Source Tools and export. And I'm going to, why am I still got 23? Oh, because I still have the other airplane in here. Don't want that. I'm going to get rid of that. X, delete. There we go. So if I come back now into Blender Source Tools, I will only find that one item that's in there for this particular airplane. I might want to change the name of the object to plane so that I know what I'm exporting. I come back in here and I can see that I'm going to export one DMX file called plane. So I export that. And I watch for any errors up here. This one exported no problem, but if I did get an error up here, all I have to do is come over here to Window, toggle the system window, and I can see everything that is there. Okay, so now that that's done, it's time to write the QC. Open up a session of Notepad++. Okay, new file, QC. Okay, and here is a basic QC. $ model name. Path from user mod models, so I want it to go into my private jack folder as a plane, in the plane folder, and I want to call it myplane.mdl. That's going to be the name of my model. So it's going to end up in user mod models, private jack, plane, S, planes, my plane. Next line is going to be a body statement. There's only one object in this particular aircraft, so body, the name of the body group, plane, and the name of the DMX file that was exported. Next, in the event that I have transparent materials or want to add transparent materials to this aircraft, I'm going to add a mostly opaque command. I'm going to now tell it CD materials, and where the materials are going to live for this aircraft, which is going to be in my materials, models, private jack, planes folder. Okay, so this is from the user mod materials folder, you have to put in the path. So in this case, it would be models, private jack, planes, and that's it. Now, every model, or every QC, every compiled model must have a sequence. Okay, be it an idle sequence or something that is totally out to lunch, like the Canopy opening and all the rest of that good stuff. Okay, so sequence statement, $ sequence, idle. And because I don't have an actual animation, all I have to do is refer back to my original DMX file as my sequence, as the DMX that holds the sequence. So plane.dmx, excuse me, turn on a curly bracket, drop down a line, frames per second, 1, close the curly bracket. I can do it this way, or I can take out the curly brackets and put it all on one line. Now, I'm not going to get into texture groups, I'm not going to get into body groups, I'm not going to get into anything else like this. This is just a simple QC to get the model into Source Filmmaker. Okay, this is basically all I need. Hitboxes and that kind of thing would be something else. I've got a complete guide on that in the Source Filmmaker guides area. Go and have a look at that. Okay, so I'm going to file save this as plane.qc. And I'm going to put it in the same folder that I extracted the plain DMX file to. Save that. As soon as I do that, what's going to happen is if I look down here and I've set this up properly, I'm going to end up with a plain QC button down here that I can press to compile the model. Okay, now looking at this model has one shape key, and I can see that right here. This particular object has one shape key. I can also see down here that it's counting that shape key as an actual shape key, not a corrective shape. So I am ready to compile the model. Press on the plain QC button, watch for any errors like what I just got here, open up the console, and let's see, what does it say? Bad command, plane, okay, on line 1. Model name, private jack, and here's my problem. I started it with an open quote and didn't close the quote on the other side of the model. Okay, that's one of the common errors with QC writing, is that you'll use quotes or opening and closing curly brackets and forget to put in the one of them. Okay, so now I'll file save that, come back here, and all I have to do now is push the plain QC button, and I still have an error. On line 3, bad command, mostly opaque. Oh, misspelt command. I only put mostly opaque. File save and compile. One model compiled, and if you want to see what's actually happened, all you have to do is look in the console window here again, and you can see the model being compiled. Okay, this model is now compiled. I'm going to just minimize this. I'm going to set up my textures. I'm going to use VTF Edit because this is just a simple model. I'm going to open up that ping file that I created with Blender. Where is my desktop? There it is. Plane rig. Okay, where did I save that to? Oh, cancel. File. Import. I'm importing a ping. Okay, so now desktop. Plane rig. Toot. Here's the plane rig, the plane PNG. I'm going to open that up. And I tell it what format I want. And everything here is pretty much good. I can drop that down to a 7.4 version. 7.5 works just as well. Okay, bring it in. So here's my texture. And I'm going to turn off, how do I do that? Save as, well, we'll let it write the QC for it as well. Okay, anyway, I'm going to go to my user mod folder. Expand that out a little bit so we can see. I'm going to go to the materials folder, private jack, materials, models, private jack, planes. Because I already have it there, that's good. And I'm just going to call this plane.vtf. And I hit save. Now, if I have auto create VMT turned on, it will automatically create a VMT. But 9 times out of 10, it will be created wrong. What it will do is it will try to create a lighted map VMT. So I'm going to open up my tools panel now, and I'm going to create a VMT for this. I'm going to load that plane texture. I'm going to go into options, and I'm going to change that from lighted map generic to vertex lit generic. I'm going to add a no call on it so that the back faces of the actual texture are passed through to the back side of the faces. I have no translucent materials in here, so I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to create the VMT. And I'm going to call it plain VMT because that is the name of the material that I gave this thing in Blender right here. Save. Okay, now that that's done, I can close that out. I can come down here in Blender Source Tools, and I can launch the HalfLife model viewer. And I can open up that model now and have a look to see what happened. User mod, models, private jack. Where are you? There you are. Planes. My plane model. There's the model created. And for some strange reason, it came in and it's not painted. Okay, so what's wrong? If I click on the Model tab, cannot find a VMT for it. Why can you not find a VMT for my plane? Okay, so let's go back here and have a quick look. Private jack planes. Where did I put it? user mod, models, private jack, planes, I want the materials, user mod, materials, models, private jack, planes, plane VMT, material name is plane, so that's right. Let's open up this, private jack planes, plane, planes, plane, check the QC again, planes, model, model, model. There's the problem. It's in models, not model. Okay, so here's another error. Now, because I've changed the QC, I have to save it, recompile the model, come into the model viewer, and all I should have to do is refresh the model. And here's my plane. Bones. I'm not seeing a Blender implicit bone, so things should be good there. Highlight hitboxes. I've got a hitbox, but not completely encompassing the aircraft. Okay, that's not a problem though. Right now, it could be if I wanted to use this in any films in Source Filmmaker. Let's have a quick look in Source Filmmaker now. Oh, where are you? Steam. Source Filmmaker. And my model is going to be extremely small because I didn't scale it for anything. I just built the thing for this tutorial, so don't laugh at it. Open up the stage. New model, plane, my plane, there it is. Open it up, comes in. Let's have a look at the bones. Like I said, the root transform was going to form on that origin point. Told you it was going to be small. Let's put it up on the stage. Default the bone. There it is, sitting on the stage. It's on the ground the way it's supposed to be. And here are all the bones. The canopy opens, the fuselage bone, the spinner bone, and if I go in here, it should spin nice and true. Prop bones, so that I can change the pitch of the actual blade. The rudder, which moves perfectly fine. The elevator, again. And because I set this thing up so that on the X and Y axis, X, Y, and Z axis, everything will move properly in space. The tail pivot. Tail wheel. Flaps. Left and right. Left aileron. Right aileron. And everything moves the way it's supposed to. Retracts. Right retract, right wheel. And of course the canopy pivot bone. So I can either use the bone to move the canopy back, or I can use the shape key flex that I created. So that's got the aircraft into Source Filmmaker. If I was going to scale it, I would use the BIP fuselage bone and add a scale to that transform. And there you have it. One airplane in Source Filmmaker ready for use. And a gorgeous airplane that it is. Why did it sink below the ground? Because I've got it scaled. Using the fuselage bone. Now, one of the things that I said is I like to put that root transform on the wheels. The reason why I do that is because now I can use the root transform to set the wheels down on the actual ground and use it in an animation for takeoff. Okay. Pull it forward and default. Default the rotation. I said default the rotation, not the position. And away it goes. Okay, so that's getting the model into Source Filmmaker in a nutshell. Any questions, feel free, leave me a note. And yeah, I guess that's it. So, Private Jack out.